Hello everybody, and welcome to the Sovereign Village Project. As many of us become rapidly concerned about the food supply and are throwing tons of energy and time and money into food production and trying to get real food production fast, it's important to find little hacks we can do to immediately get good nutritive food into our body. In particular, fruit is kind of a tough one because there's just not that many annual fruits. Of course, you have strawberries, you have watermelons and other melons and different fruits like that, but those are often quite challenging, and the real bounty you're going to get, of course, is perennials, your apple trees, your pear trees, your berry bushes, your many options as far as perennials go when it comes to fruit. But the problem is all of that takes a lot of time. So one great way to get a lot of fruit going is to look around what's around you, already growing wild, things like blackberries, wild black raspberries, and sumac and elderberries and the many wild berries that are all over the U.S. Learn what's in your region, learn to identify them and go out and find where they are, and then start farming them because there's so much you can do. This is really how most of humanity farmed. This is kind of, I think, how the Garden of Eden basically worked, is that humans have free license to interfere with nature. This is a garden. It's not just a wilderness, it's a garden. We were given a garden to work in. And it's the same way the Indians and the Mayans, it's the way many indigenous cultures farmed, which is basically they saw what was around them and then they just started adapting the conditions for the things around them. So for example, we have some really nice looking blackberries here. They've climbed all the way up this tree. You can see the stalk over here. They've climbed all the way up this sumac tree to get to that sunlight, and they're getting the sunlight they need apparently and all the nutrition because they're producing abundantly. But there's a lot of other parts of this bush over here. You can see down here, there's a lot of these blackberries here. And many of them are getting obscured from the sunlight, and their growth is going to be hindered by that. So I'm selectively, knowing which direction south is, I'm selectively removing plants. Sometimes I'm even removing productive plants out of the way. For example, this is sumac, and I am breaking many of these branches to provide more sunlight to these blackberries. The reason is I have plenty of sumac. This whole field is all sumac. I have no shortage of sumac. I would rather these blackberries. So I'm prioritizing them, and I'm going through and I'm opening up light for them. And then later I'll take some compost and I'll add that around the base and kind of do a little chop and drop around the base of those plants. So I didn't plant them, they were already there. But when I do all these things, not only will they produce abundantly for me, they'll actually taste better too. When you add a lot of nutrients to fruits, they seem, at least in my redneck theory, they seem to taste a whole lot better. I experimented with that with wild garlic as well earlier this spring. I put a bunch of compost around them and they got big and they tasted way better than the other wild garlic. They tasted more like something worth planting. So why bother planting some things when stuff is growing so abundantly? All these berries are going to be here for the picking if I can beat the birds to them. And they'll be juicy, they'll be delicious, and they'll be just as much a product of my farm as something that I went out and worked hard to plant, but way easier, and they're ready to go. The production is already happening without me having to do a thing except for just make the conditions a little better. I'll just break some leaves, open up a little light, give them a little fertility, and boom, I'll get some free fruit. So I encourage you to think about that and look what's around you. The most important part of farming is identifying what's already there, because I'm surrounded by edible food right now, none of which I planted, all of which grows without insect damage. Nothing hardly touches these. You can already see these sumac berries coming into play. I know they do well here. They're built for this climate, and I'm surrounded by this abundance. All I have to do is learn to identify it, not kill it, and then make the conditions better for it. And I already have a farm before I've planted a single seed. So everyone, I encourage you to try some farm foraging on your property. In the meantime, stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.